My name's Simon Fanshawe. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Has anybody heard me speak on this subject recently? That's a relief. So, no, I just feel, don't want to go through the same old rubbish. So very informal. I'm going to chomp through some stuff and then see if we've got some time at the end just for some questions and reactions. I'm sure there are feedback forms. I hate feedback forms. I always ask the organisers to pre-print them with 9 out of 10 because that seems sensible. But if you do get them, do be generous. I did actually do I did a conference the other day and there's a pile of them and I looked at them and I thought, well, I'll see what people said. And somebody had written next door to my name, if I only had an hour left to live in my life, I'd want to spend it listening to a speech by Simon Fanshawe. I know, and there was that asterisk and I turned to the continuation page and they'd written, because it would seem like eternity. So I very much hope you don't feel like that by the end. So that's the title of the thing. One of the things that I think is difficult about talking about diversity, inclusion, equality, and all those subjects is that people chat on about it. And what tends to happen is people sort of pile cliche on simple thought. And there's very little talked about how you actually do it. So I'm not going to talk much about why you might do it. I'm going to talk much more about how you might do it. What are the practical reasons for doing it? And I want to start from a different sort of place. Everything we do is really based on the way we started the company, which was that we started from a position of despondency and optimism. Despondency, because actually the truth of it is there's very little achieved in diversity, despite the stuff that has been achieved, and you look around the room and you can see some of, we are some of those achievements. Actually, the pace of change and the size of change is really very small. So we started from that despondency, but the optimism was that if we could work out why that had been so slow and so small, we could therefore develop some things that actually brought about change. So that's why we're starting from a new place, and that's the point to start. I don't start from the position of diversity in this discussion. I start from the position of what have we, as a company, as an organisation, and outside of those, I would start from what kind of society do we want to build. So you've got to start from whatever it is the organisation's trying to do. And diversity isn't just a thing you do, it then becomes a way that you do things. So you need to start really thinking about the talent you need in order to achieve the goals you've set yourselves. So very basically, I'm going to try and look at a bit of the answers to these 3 questions. Why is there so little and such slow progress? Why organisations need specific reasons to pursue particular kinds of diversity. That's increasingly important, it seems to me. We cannot go on talking in generalisations. And why we need change. We actually need to change the processes we use in order to develop the right combination of talent and so on. So, we know at the moment there are massive deficits. Notwithstanding the achievements, there are massive deficits. There are more men called John, David and Andrew in the top 300 jobs of the FTSE 100 than there are women and black and Asian people. And I know because I counted them recently and then I got a friend of mine in Parliament to ask the question, so it's in Hansard, so it's true. But that is actually true. That is the shape of boards, unfortunately. We work with a law firm, not a million miles from here, ladies and gentlemen, in Canary Wharf, who have more partners called David than they do women. 14% of their partners are called David, and only 11% of their partners are women. So the question is, this is bad news. But the trouble is that diversity has become what I call the blah, blah, blah. Every website, every company's statement of intent has on it the blah, blah, blah. We aim to foster a culture where individuals of all backgrounds feel confident bringing their whole selves to work. We want a workforce as diverse as the communities, blah, blah, blah. We know that a truly diverse workforce brings the widest blah, 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 blah. Integrating the diverse perspectives of our employees into every blah, 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 blah. 4 statements from 4 companies in the FTSE 100. They mean it. It's not that they don't mean it. Intentions are where you've got to start. But intentions aren't enough. Words aren't enough. Good ideas aren't enough. You've actually got to bring about some change. Because what's happened is that diversity has become the vegetarian samosa of HR policies. Everybody can eat it, doesn't taste, if anything, doesn't change your life, and the few gluten intolerant who won't eat it and resist. So we need change. Fundamentally, we need change if we're going to achieve what we say we want to achieve, which is a much greater set of opportunities for people and a much better combination of difference within our talent and workforce in order to achieve the goals that we've set ourselves. But what do we know about change? There's a lot of talk about unconscious bias. Unconscious bias. There was a lovely example earlier on from Claudia, who I thought said it brilliantly. She talked about the value of unconscious bias. Oh, that was terrific. Unconscious bias is really useful. It stops us walking out in front of cars on busy roads, as she said. Unconscious bias is very powerful. We are socialized incredibly powerfully from the moment we are born as men and women into behaviors. And we all have preferences, and then we then develop them. And we develop them because of the environments and the forces within which we grow up. So they're very, very powerful, and they're very important, and they help us. But they also damage our relationships with other human beings. The reason I put that up is that is a very famous story, and I'm sure you all know it, but it bears repetition, of the orchestras recruiting musicians in the 70s in America. And they said, we just want to listen to how people play, and we just want to recruit the best musicians. And they kept on recruiting musicians from a single demographic. As it happened, white men. Now, it's important to say at this point, there's absolutely nothing wrong with white men. Some of us are absolutely lovely. But what's odd is that statistically, it's slightly unlikely that all the best musicians come from a single demographic group. So they thought, what is going on here? Our good intentions are not producing good results, or they're not producing the results we want. So they put the curtain in. Does anybody watch The Voice? Yes? Yeah, no, don't. Terrible program. Get out, have a walk. You know, it's a great program. It's fine. But it's the same mechanism when they turn the chair around. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, you actually have the evidence first and the person second. Because what the research on the orchestras tells us is that those musicians who are white and male, the people auditioning them, the physical fact of them being white and male, a non-musical piece of evidence, resulted in a musical judgment that they played better. They actually heard them play better. They made a conclusion the minute they saw them about how they played. When they put the curtain in, they could actually listen to how they played. So what we have to do in order to change the way in which we make choices about people, we have to put ourselves in a redesign position so we can make better decisions. And the work that's most persuasive on this, and if you haven't read her book, it's well worth reading, and in the research note, do bung that table by table if you'd be kind enough, make sure it flows through the room, those two pieces of paper. There's a wonderful woman called Iris Bonnet. Yeah, if you pass it backwards, rather, there's two. So if you do one there and one there, that would be great. It's a wonderful woman called Iris Bonnet, B-O-H-N-E-T, who's a professor at Harvard Kennedy. And she wrote a book last year called What Works? Gender Equality by Design. And she's kind of our research mentor, and that's why we rebranded our name by that, because the whole point of her research has demonstrated that you make those decisions, the bias creeps in the minute you see somebody, either in person or in a CV or whatever. We have to redesign our processes to enable us to make better decisions. So the whole crucial thing about change is the redesign. Point number two, this is just a handy way of thinking about diversity, but one of the problems with it is that the deficits are always elided with the dividends. Now, there are huge deficits. In the NHS, our sainted NHS, you're almost twice as likely to go into disciplinary if you're black and Asian than if you're white. You're almost twice as likely to go from a shortlist to a job if you're white than if you're black or Asian. This is in the NHS. The deficits are all over organisations. The John, David and Andrews in the FTSE. The partners called David. We know that these deficits are there. Now, these deficits, you can find them out by data. And one of the problems, it was an interesting question before about what does progress look like? Would it be the demographic representation of the population in jobs? No. Because the problem with representation is the minute you start to average it out, it becomes the enemy of progress. What organisations do we know that say we've got 50% men and 50% women? What organisations do we know that say we've got 25% black and Asian people? Then you look at it, probably this hotel would be an absolute classic example. All the women and black and Asian people would be in the majority in lower grades. So averages don't help. Demographic representation doesn't necessarily help. This is about identifying exactly what the deficits are and then doing something about it. Example, in a health trust we worked in, we do this insight work and we go and we ask people, does the trust meet your ambitions? What do you feel about your prospects of promotion? How do you feel that you're valued for your difference by the trust? And when we got the results back, people had written verbatim. There were phrases like jobs for the boys, a tap on the shoulder, depends who you know. And we discovered that what was happening in the trust was that if a job was less than 6 months, so it was interim, there was no process for recruitment. They were literally being asked to get somebody now. So people were ringing their mates. Now, the reason they do that was that if you don't fill the job, the finance director she comes and takes it away because it's an easy cut. And the second thing is that in the NHS, it's run by this sense of complete urgency the whole time. Oh my God, if we don't get people in a job, people will die. Well, here's the bad news for the NHS. People die anyway. You're not in a success business. You're in a mitigation business. As long as they're not dying more often than they should do, people will die, okay? So stop using urgency as the reason to get the wrong people. So what was happening was the managers who were mainly white were ringing their mates who were mainly white, and they were getting the opportunities. The black staff were being excluded. Now, the fundamental reason for that is to do with the racial structure of the country and the way in which friendship groups work and blah, 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 to do with racism. But it wasn't a racist impulse that created the deficit in that particular case. So the specificity of the deficit leads to a much more specific solution. So we put in a very quick, easy way of expanding the opportunities across the whole of the staff and much broadly around the population, but which was quick and easy. And it started to change the numbers already. The deficits are very specific. You can't just generalize about the deficits and say, oh, it's racism, oh, it's sexism, or whatever. The gender pay gap work that's been done on the medical part of the NHS at the moment by Dame Janet, whatever her name is, can't remember, terrible, very, very distinguished professor. I saw her the other day lecture, and she said, you know, in East England, one of the determinants of gender pay gap is travel time. These things can be very, very specific. So if we want to solve the deficits and really open up talent opportunities for people who are currently disadvantaged in some ways, we have to go for specific analysis and solutions, not generalized ones. And they are there. They're there in all organizations. Very quickly, just turn to the person sitting next door to you, look them in the eye, and say to them, this is as far as you are going in your career. It always gets the same response. It always gets the same response. It's this terrible nervous laughter. It's impossible. How can you look somebody in the eye and say that? But actually, that is what organizations are doing to whole swathes of people. So those are the deficits, and they need to be specifically solved. The dividends come from something else, and we'll talk about them in a second. But just to say the local nature of the deficit. So I've made one point about the trusts. This is an interesting example. Do you know the Rooney Rule? This little bloke in the middle is Rooney. It always makes me laugh, this picture. Rooney owns a football team, and he became the Grand High Wizard or something of the NFL in America. And he looked at the talent stream and said, this is mad. We've got thousands of black players. We've got loads of black coaches. We've got no black managers. What is going on? We're wasting talent. So he made the Rooney Rule, which was that if you're going to interview for a manager, you have to have 2 high-quality black candidates on the shortlist. Massively opened up the talent pipeline for people. It was a top-down solution to an identified deficit. Another good one is if, for instance, the Royal Free, the chief nurse in the Royal Free, what she has said is about that disciplinary point that I told you earlier on, the disadvantage of putting black and Asian people going into far more disciplinaries than their white colleagues. She has said to all her managers, before you put anybody into formal disciplinary, I want to see the paperwork. And she's trained them. And the reason she's done this is that the reason that white managers, and they're mostly white, put black staff into disciplinaries is they don't know how to deal with the informal conversations that they need to have, which they would have with their white colleagues. That's what the research tells us. So what the chief nurse is saying is think. Because once you put somebody to disciplinary, the level of stress, the wasted money, the wasted talent is enormous. We lose tons and tons of money through that deficit. So there are top-down things you can do about deficits quite often, but you have to understand exactly what's happening. So bless Rooney. So that would be one thing that you could say in your organisation. Identify a clear deficit and think about a top-down way that you might do. You could do that with flexible working too. If you've got a flexible working policy, normally those flexible working policies don't work because managers say, no, we can't make your job flexible. Well, actually, then what you have to do is go to HR and you have to be the whistleblower and blah, blah. No. What you say to the managers is, we've got this policy, we'll help you to understand it. If staff members ask for it, you need to say yes. And if you're going to say no, head of HR, I'd like to see the paperwork, please. It's an easy way of transferring the responsibility in order to make the policy work. So the dividends. How do you get the dividend out of diversity? What does that really mean? So there's all this generic statistics, McKinsey and the like, very, very useful stuff to establish the case that more diverse groups and organisations perform better. Well, here's the news. Firstly, research says that's not necessarily true. It's only true when they're well managed. In fact, homogenous organisations and teams and departments work far, far better than badly managed diverse ones. So there are circumstances in which diversity works. So we have to work out when diversity works, how it works, and how we make it work. And the first thing I would argue, again, is this specific question. Interesting case in point. This is Andrew Mackenzie, the chief exec of BHP Billiton, the largest mining company in the world. Now, they reached this, and the language is important, an ambitious and aspirational goal. It's not a target. It's a goal, and it's ambitious, and it's aspirational. They've only got 14% of their workforce is women, so they won't get there, but they've set the goal. The interesting thing is not that they set the goal, it's how they got to set the goal. How did they get to set the goal? They started their long-term planning, looking over 20, 30 years, and I know this because the group treasurer of BHP Billiton is a woman called Vandita Pant. She very kindly came and gave a presentation to an organisation called Powerful Women that I'm on the board of, or on whose board I sit. My English teacher would prefer me to say. And Powerful Women is great. It's about changing opportunities for women in the energy sector. So Vandita told us the first thing they asked was, what's our talent pipeline look like in terms of numbers? Well, 75% of people who work in mining are over 50. So already, next 10 years, 15 years, they've got a huge numbers question. Number two, mining is fundamentally changing. Through robotics, AI, big data, drones, all of that means that it's no longer just a dirty industry. It's no longer blokes, in hard hats and Wellingtons covered in mud, who you mainly find in clubs in Brighton, where I live, naturally. So it's changing fundamentally as an industry. So the skills mix they need in the industry is fundamentally different. So they thought to themselves, well, if we could attract women into mining, would that help? So then what they did was they looked down into the company and they looked at any team in the company that had more than 20% of women. And they discovered that all those teams who had at least 20% of women performed better than the other teams by a very significant amount, a 68% reduction in injuries and a 14% increase in accuracy of forecasting. Why? They looked at the way those teams work. The truth of it is, when you put men and women together, they make different decisions about risk, how to take it, how to assess it, how to mitigate it. They make very different decisions, and they work differently and more collaboratively if they're well managed as a combination. And you can kind of see it, can't you? I mean, on the safety front, I'm picking on you as an example, but if you and I had a dumper truck each, we'd race them, wouldn't we? Because we're boys. That's what we boys do. But if you were there, we might be more sensible. It's not always true, but men and women together creates behaviour change. Black and white together creates behaviour change, when actually there's some kind of combination there. So the way you get the deficits is looking for the way in which those teams are going to work together to produce the greatest results. But the important thing, the way you get the dividends, but the important thing is to understand how you get the dividends, you have to start from what you're trying to do in the first place. So back to that point about demography, it's not always demographic representation. We're working with a food retailer at the moment, and I kind of can't do this without telling you, you'll guess who it is. They're a very middle-class food retailer, and they're very white middle-class food retailer, and they're trying to broaden their middle-class base. They don't want to stop being a middle-class food retailer because that's their brand. And if I tell you that there's a famous story about a boy, an 8-year-old in the queue saying to his daddy in this particular store, "Daddy, is the T in Lego silent like it is in Merlot?" You'll know what store I'm talking about. So anyway, but the point about it is that if you look at the people who work in marketing, product development, distribution, advertising, the whole range of things that people do, the specific kind of diversity you will need once you've unlocked the deficits and enabled anybody to start to rise in the company, the specific combinations of people will be different for different tasks. So you've got to do both. You've got to unlock the deficits and also look for ways in which you can specifically identify diversity that you need. So that would be one of the things you do. Don't be satisfied with the blah, blah, blah for your organisation about why you're doing diversity. The question I want you to take back today is to your organisation is exactly why is diversity the right talent strategy for us? And exactly what kind of diversity do we need in the different bits of our organisation. And I'll develop that a bit in a minute. So this is about how teams work. What are the most productive teams? The first thing is that we all know we don't achieve things on our own, notwithstanding our individual brilliance. We're all brilliant, and we've all got something to contribute. Well, most people are brilliant, got something to contribute. But everybody's got something to contribute. It's a question of finding what they've got to contribute. We don't do things on our own. Just for a moment, in your head, think of the team you work in or you manage. Run around that group of people. Who do you rely on, and for what? You kind of know? Yes? You sort of know, don't you? You've got a fairly clear idea. And it always annoys me when you go to places and they say, oh, you know, I'm always asking Kate to go and mow the lawn or something, you know, and she's hopeless at it. She can't do it. And I always said, well, stop asking her. I mean, it's pointless. If she can't do it, play to her strengths, don't play to her weakness. So what makes great teams work really, really well? Well, one of the things that makes it, it's back to this point about well-managed diversity, you really need to value difference in a real way. So the questions that have been talked about on the panel before, it's what you've got to understand is what people are able to bring. And one of the problems is that the proxies like must have a degree or must have worked, you know, gone to Cambridge or must have worked in the law for 10 years or blah, blah, blah. All these proxies that people use for brilliance and experience, actually they don't necessarily get to the root of what people can actually bring. So an example, we're doing some recruitment on social work in one of the London boroughs. And there's a lovely woman who's the head of the youth and the young people and children's and young people's teams there. And she said the other day, and I'll get to this point in a minute, but we set aside CVs because that's where the bias comes in. She said, I can't possibly, I've got to see the CV. I said, why? She said, because if somebody's had, 3 jobs in the last 2 years, they're not getting on my shortlist, she said. So I said, well, okay, what if that person was bullied out of the first job, went to another job, got another job, then actually, as a result of that, did have a bit of a breakdown, took some time off, back in the saddle, but now her partner's moving and she wants to come work in this borough as opposed to another borough. In 3 years, she's had 2, 3, she's trying to get a third job for really good reasons. And here's the big point. What she's learned about resilience, mental health, getting back in the saddle, and adaptability is precisely, perhaps, some of the skills you need when social workers are dealing with young people. So don't not put her on the shortlist. Put her on and explore what she can bring. So it's valuing the difference always in people. That's the key thing. This is on the list of research, and do make sure that piece of paper goes to the back. It's a very good book. It's slightly difficult to read because there's a lot of statistics in it. And if you're like me, I'm not very good at sines and cosines and all that business. But it's a very good book. And he started out looking at the way in which individuals thrived in economies. And he tried to work out who thrived better. What he discovered was, he was using simulations and avatars and things, and he discovered that actually the randomly selected teams of people thrived better than the specially selected ones of experts or with high skills. And he started, and this is a hobby, and then it turned into a 10-year research project. And he set out to prove why diversity trumps ability. And his fundamental point was that if you say, I'm going to get all the best people for the job, and you don't interrogate what best means, what you do is you get people who've gone through very similar routes. So if you just recruit from the level below into the level above, and you just go, engineering or social work or any discipline, people will likely have risen through a very, very similar route. Actually, what you're doing when you say the best without interrogating is you're doing the same, actually saying the same. I'm actually going to recruit the same group of people. And he discovered that if you put difference into a team, you get much better results under certain circumstances. This is another project. Again, there's a research note on this. This was Google trying to find out what their best performing teams were. In the end, there's a lot of research on what makes teams work well, but the key thing is not representation, it's norms. It's how the team works with each other. And these are 3 key things which teams need to use in order to work well together. In other words, there needs to be some equality. So one of the things you'll notice is that if you get teams that everybody has a stake in the discussion, and they take work away and they hold each other accountable for it, actually you work much better because you help each other. Secondly, the sensitivity, how much you know about each other. You don't have to like each other at work, but you do have to understand each other and you have to know how to work with other people. And just a note about this, I can't bear this phrase, bring your whole self to work. Because what people do is they talk about the whole self. No, the phrase is bring your whole self to work. We worked with a manager who was so bad, this person's department was in chaos. People were being bullied, shouted at in the corridor, the whole thing. This person's behaviour was appalling. So we took this person into the room and said, look, your behaviour is just not working. It's not helping you manage this thing. And this person said to us, well, that's just me. I'm just bringing my whole self to work. I said, well, will you stop? Stay at home and upset your own family because you're really upsetting your staff. It's bringing your whole self to work. That's the key thing about that. Look, homogenous teams feel easier. I always think of my dad when I see this. My dad's dead, but he used to say, he's an army man, he used to say, you're not cold, you just think you are. And the thing about managing homogenous teams is people think they're easy to manage, but actually, good management is always understanding other people's difference. That's how you work out how to motivate people. So it's an appearance that it's easier to manage homogeneity. It's actually as easy to manage diversity. It's just it's just called good management. And homogeneity isn't always good. And I'll just tell you what this is, because I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's Donald Trump signing, and I've got to get it absolutely right. It's Donald Trump signing an executive order that bans federal funding for international health organisations that perform or even speak with parents about abortion and women's health. So there we go. So here's a good example, I think, of what we're talking about here. That's Jill Hicks. That's Jill Hicks. Jill Hicks was blown up in the bomb in 7/7 in the tube. Her parents were both dead, and I know her because of something called the Forgiveness Project. It's a wonderful project. If you're having a shit day, look on theforgivenessproject.com. It'll cheer you up like mad. Jill was blown up, and her parents were dead, and she said because her parents were dead, she never thought again she would experience unconditional love. That day, on the tube, the strangers who tourniquet her legs and helped her out of the tube, she experienced unconditional love from those people. And some of those individuals are in there. This is the team of people, from those strangers right the way through to the doctors and the physios who put her back together again. She's married, she has babies, she lives in Australia. She never thought she'd experience unconditional love, but she did. But when she got into treatment, it was the skill of those people plus their humanity plus their skill. It was their expertise that put her back together again, and their training that put them back together again. And then when she came and met them, she told me a really lovely thing. She said, you know, I met all of them and I didn't like all of them. It's not about liking people. It's about that combination of the basic human instinct. It's about the skill, and it's about being able to work with other people's skills. It's not about liking them. If they're toxic and horrible, that's different. But I'm talking within the normal bands of behaviour. So how do we do this? Well, back to the orchestras. We have to design processes that put the curtains in so we really can hear how applicants for recruitment or promotion or whatever are playing. So this is what I call the virtuous circle of recruitment. What you have to work out is what you're trying to do, what kind of diversity would enable you to do it better. So let's think about who you've already got, so then we can work out who brings the difference that you need. So I'm cantering at this point. So we've developed this idea. So what you do is you do the role criteria, the essential criteria, the difference criteria. Talking before, listening to the panel, what people don't always think about when they do this takes 2 hours, an hour and a half I can do this with a team. What does the job actually involve? So we're just recruiting some professors at Newcastle in the engineering department. When you recruit a top-rated professor in a Russell Group university, normally what you do is you go, who have they worked with, have they got 4-star, a research record, what's their publications, blah, blah, blah. Say to Phil, the head of engineering, is that what you want? He says, no. What I want, he says, is a catalyst. I've got 10 or 12 academics who work in this field, and I want this person to manage those people into a much more collaborative group. I want more collaborative research, and I want each one of them to earn $2 million a year in 4 years' time. I don't care whether this person does. He wants somebody who's a catalyst. Now, that is absolutely saying, at this moment, at this time, in this organisation, that's what I need. And you do that at all levels. Don't take the old job description. Don't take it as assumed and read. Second, what are the essential criteria? In this particular job, what Phil said is PhD or equivalent industrial career, you know. So what he's saying is somebody ran an industrial lab. He said, I don't care if they've been published in all the journals. I want to know that they can run a research lab to a really high degree and they'll be respected by the others. What is actually the job about? Occupational health nurse practitioner. We said to them, what's the job about? This, well, you know, we liaise. No, you don't. What do you actually do? What you actually do is I meet you, I get your permission, and I get your health out of you, your health situation. I then make a professional judgment. I then get your consent again for us to make a plan to take to your boss. Because if I don't get your consent to take a plan to your boss, nothing happens. I could be the best qualified occupational health nurse in the world, but if I haven't got those human skills, those diplomatic skills, alongside my expertise, I'm no use to anybody. What does the job actually entail? And the last thing is the difference criteria. So who you are at work and how you are at work. So that's the kind of way of combining two sorts of diversity. Who you are, so you're unlocking deficits, but you're also looking, when you talk about who you are, this is not a recipe. This is not just add black people and gays and stir. This is about why you want who you want. You're asking people to tell you what they can bring through their lived experience. So, I always say about me, there's nothing interesting about being gay. Something quite interesting about growing up gay, growing up black, growing up a woman, growing up a man, growing up across cultures, etc., etc., etc. That's interesting. So when women leave work and they go off and have babies, but any women done that? Yes? When you come back, what do companies do? They say, what have you forgotten? What they should ask you is, what have you learned? About pain, stress, no sleep, managing difficult conversations, blah, blah, blah. So it's what you can bring through who you are. And then there's a question of how you work. And what we all know is that teams need that difference in how they work. If you watch the All Blacks, they're all stars, they don't play as stars. If anybody's a rugby fan, I'm a big rugby fan, fantastic match the other day, hurrah. But here's the thing, in this process, you only use the criteria, those red criteria. Because what Iris's work shows so strongly is the minute you see a CV, that is the moment when the bias kicks in again. If I see you in person or I see your CV, that's the moment I start to make judgments. So once you've gone through that rigorous process of working out role, essential, difference criteria, only evidence against that criteria. Don't just blank, anonymized CVs. Not enough. We all know how to read them. Take the CVs away. Get somebody else to check them. Do due diligence on the facts compared with the evidence. Take the CVs away. This is an example of senior partners looking for commercial law. Breadth of experience in working collaboratively. Evidence how they manage teams with relationships with men and women. Build a team where difference is valued. Deliver new business, hitherto untapped markets. That's a senior law professional. Of course they can do commercial law. They can't get in, that's the essential qualification. They can't get through the door if they don't have the basic expertise. But that's what this company really wants now. It wants more women, and it wants men and women to work really well together in the firm, because they think, and they also want people who can help them into untapped markets. Whether that's people of different social backgrounds, whether that's different people of different ethnic backgrounds, whatever. That is not a usual description. And when we did the professors that I was just talking about, the ones before at Nottingham, the criteria were very specifically aimed at encouraging women to apply. We never said we want women, but the language and what we were looking for was directed at the sorts of things that we know that women will respond to. 15% of the applicants were women, fairly standard in engineering. Using the red criteria and no CVs, 35% of the shortlist was women, and they appointed 2 women. Once you set down the real criteria, you're starting to look for what people can actually bring through their personal and professional experience. And that's when you say to yourself, as a black woman, as a white man, as a gay woman, whatever, what am I actually bringing? Make the invitation explicit. I'm going to have to race now, but don't put it in the blah, blah, blah at the bottom. Tie the invitation and the diversity of what you're looking for to your strategic objectives from the very beginning. And there's the results on that. And then you've got to decide on a measurement of success. Don't just go for the numbers. What you want to do is measure the success of your diversity, talent, strategy in relation to your outcomes. It's not just the numbers, it's the success in achieving the outcomes. That's what you want to measure. In the NHS, has more diversity created better health outcomes for the patients who use your hospital? That's the measurement of success. So there you go, to recap. It's all about change. Be specific. Design out the bias. We cannot educate our way out of it. Signs in the national parks in America. We are losing thousands of tons of our natural heritage because people are stealing wood. Stealing went up. Why did it go up? Because people thought, oh, fantastic. Didn't know you could steal. Pop wood in the pocket. Changed the signs and added other members of the national park don't like this. New norm, stealing went down. You've got to design things differently. You've got to create new norms for people. And the big thing about this is you can't change your whole recruitment system in one. So what you do is you take 2 or 3 jobs, and we run this process with you, and I tell you it has a dynamic effect. Once HR get this, once the leadership get this, and once the hiring managers get this, they suddenly begin to see that this is a much more creative way of hiring the people they actually want. That's me. Just to end with a story, my husband, my lovely husband, 5 years, I got married rather late. I always say love to me is like diabetes, it's late onset. So Adam, my lovely husband, I thought there was a picture of him there. I thought I'd put it in the slide pack. But just to illustrate what this is really about, my husband is Nigerian and I'm British and he's African. So, I'm European and he's black and I'm white. And he's religious and I'm not religious at all. In fact, he's a Muslim and I'm definitely not a Muslim. And we're 26 years apart in age. And every time I tell people that set of facts, they always say the same thing. They say, how do you deal with the age gap? Because those headlines are too big, aren't they? But actually, as 2 human beings, don't you sometimes wake up in the morning and look at your partner and think, I have no idea who you are? And other days you wake up and think, I know exactly who you are. And that's fundamentally the point about diversity. It's the only thing about human beings that's the same is that we're all different. And you can never understand another human being. You can never understand what they bring, who they are, what they think, how they see the world. But you can go on the journey in the recognition of that difference and fundamentally in the recognition that that journey of discovery never ends. So what underlies the rather prosaic notion of putting in the curtain and changing promotion and recruitment is actually part of that journey to discover what people can really bring through their ability, through their life stories, through their personality. It's understanding that and trying to work on ways of really effectively combining it. You've been very kind. Thank you very much for listening. I'm not sure there's any time for... I'm looking out there whether we might... if anybody's got a couple of questions, I think we've got just half a minute or something like that. Has anybody got any challenge or question or whatever? You're all going to get prizes now, so I'm holding you from the prizes. Look, thanks very much. I think they have to clear the room, but thank you for coming. Thank you for rushing your lunches, and thanks for listening. And if I could get those 2 sheets, that would be fantastic.